Regresamos ahora con el profesor Noam Chomsky. Profesor Chomsky, el imperio de Estados Unidos se está acabando.
Now is a dramatic moment because the U.S. is losing control everywhere. I mean, the Middle East is the most important place, but China is another case, and in fact, the Western Hemisphere is another case. I mean, it's always been taken for granted that the so-called backyard will be under control. In fact, if you go back to internal records in the Nixon years, when they were planning the overthrow of the Allende government, came straight out and said, look, if we can't control Latin America, how are we going to control the world? You know? Well, can't control Latin America anymore. In fact, step by step, Latin America is, for the first time in 500 years, moving towards independence and integration. So, for example, there wasn't much fuss made about it, but last February, when the CELAC was formed, I forget the exact, Caribbean and Latin American countries have now an organization which excludes the United States and Canada. That's a slap in the face. Now, so far it's only a form, but if it really becomes operative, that eliminates the OAS, the Organization of American States, which the U.S. runs. And it's essentially saying to the United States, get out of our affairs. You know? And there are other steps that are proceeding. For example, China, it turns out, is now the largest, has surpassed the United States as an importer from Brazil, and probably will surpass it as a trading partner. That's big news, you know.
Profesor Chomsky, el caso de Honduras, el golpe de Estado del año pasado, ¿esto no fue un golpe duro para las fuerzas progresistas como el ALBA en América Latina? ¿No fue una gran victoria para Estados Unidos?
South America has significantly moved towards integration and independence, like UNASUR, for example, is not just a paper organization. It doesn't do much, but for example, it objected to the U.S. bases in Colombia. It's done other things. Supported Morales when he was under attack from the old elite in the eastern provinces. Bank of the South might mean something, and Mercosur's taking some kind of shape. So South America has been pulling away, which is very significant. But Central America so far has, up until this, has been under control. Central America, first of all, was devastated by Reagan's terrorist wars, including Honduras, and it's barely emerging from that. But it had been pretty, disciplined. Nicaragua was a kind of a break, but it's mostly doesn't bother the U.S. that much. Honduras is serious. One reason, of course, is just the Palmarola Air Base. That's the one major military base the U.S. has in that region. Was the main base for attacking Nicaragua during the Contra War, and the U.S. wants to hang on to it. And also, as you said, Honduras is like the traditional banana republic. If we can't hold on to that, we're really in trouble. So Obama rather deviously supported the coup. I mean, the words said we're opposed to it, but the actions showed that we support it. And they were able to carry it off. So that was a successful military coup. But notice, in comparison to the past, that the way it was carried out tells you a lot. I mean, in earlier years, if the U.S. wanted to support a military coup, it just told the army, okay, go in and throw out the government, or it did it itself. This time they had to do it in a sort of devious, roundabout way, which could more or less pass in Europe. Europe is so obedient to the United States that they said, okay, we don't like it, but you more or less stayed within the law, which of course is not true. But couldn't carry it off in the rest of the world, and they couldn't carry it off the way they did in the past. Those are signs of the increasing weakness of the United States in imposing what they call stability in the hemisphere. Actually, if you look at this decade, there have been 3 coup attempts. The first one in Venezuela, the U.S. supported openly, was beaten back. The second in Haiti, the U.S. carried off. The U.S. and France and Canada did, in effect, carry out a military coup in Haiti, kidnapped the president, sent him off to Central Africa, banned his party, which would probably win any election. That's a real military coup. Well, Haiti's a weak state, so they could carry it out. And the third was Honduras. That's 3 in a decade. It's nothing like the days when the U.S. could just topple governments at will. Nothing like, say, John F. Kennedy, who could organize a military coup in Brazil, and it happened to take place right after the assassination, but it was organized by the Kennedys. And, you know, Brazil's a big country, not a small place. And there wasn't a big problem. They installed one of the first of the murderous national security states that then spread like a plague over the continent. And so it went. But those days are over. And it's causing a lot of concern in foreign policy circles. I mean, even a state as powerful as the United States can't any longer maintain the kind of global dominance that was outlined during the Second World War and very largely implemented.
Profesor Chomsky, usted escribió un libro muy importante hace 20 años sobre la fabricación de consenso hecho por los grandes medios comerciales. Su capacidad de controlar el pensamiento de las personas ha cambiado en estas últimas 2 décadas.
Well, let's take TeleSur, RTV, Press TV, or Al Jazeera, which is the biggest of them. And they're there. And let's take a real event, okay? Take, say, the Israeli invasion of Gaza, which was actually a U.S.-Israeli invasion of Gaza. The U.S. participated all the way. It was possible to get live 24-hour coverage of what was happening in Gaza from Al Jazeera. Okay, it was there. And in fact, there are 2 towns in the United States where you could see it. One of them is in Michigan. I think it's Dearborn. They have a big Arab population. And one is some small town up in northern New Hampshire. So in the rest of the world, you could see 24-hour live coverage of the major event of that period. In the U.S., it wasn't banned. So if you happened to be in those towns, you could get it on cable TV. If you were savvy enough to go to the internet, you could pick it up on the internet. But as for the effect on the population, it did better under the Soviet Union. I mean, way more people were listening to the BBC under the Soviet Union that get access to outside sources here. In fact, huge numbers were getting their news from the BBC and the Voice of America. We know that from studies. Here, it's there. And if you know what you're looking for and you work hard, you can find it. But, and that's good, you know, glad you can find it. But it's a special taste. The internet is very valuable if you know what you're doing. But for most of the population, it's as if you wanted to become, say, a biologist. And I said, okay, go to Harvard Library and read all the biology journals. You're not going to learn anything. I mean, they're there, you know, but you have to know what you're looking for.
Profesor Chomsky, el cambio climático, la posibilidad de una guerra nuclear, las crisis de comida, los desastres naturales, en este momento, en muchos sentidos, el mundo realmente es aterrador. ¿Usted tiene esperanza?
Climate change is not only frightening, but what is quite striking is that there's almost no way to deal with it within existing institutional structures. I mean, the United States doesn't really have a market system. No country could survive with a market system. That's too destructive. But it has a partial market system. And to the extent that a market system functions, you're lost. If you're the, say, executive of a corporation, you are required, in fact, even by law, to maximize short-term profit and gain and to disregard what are called externalities, like the fate of the species. If you don't do it because you're a bad person, maybe you care about the fate of the species, but you can't care about it in your business dealings. I mean, if you decide to be a decent person, you're out. And somebody else is in who's going to do exactly what's institutionally required. The effect is that you have, say, in the United States, major propaganda campaigns run by the business world, which are trying to convince people, forget about it. It's either it's not happening or humans aren't involved or whatever. That's a death sentence. And the very people who are running the campaigns know it perfectly well. They know as well as you and I and others do that it's very serious, but they're trapped. This is the institutional structure they're in. They can't get out of it. Now that's serious. So if you look at the world, I mean, there are kind of, roughly speaking, two trajectories. There is the trajectory that's being slowly, haltingly pursued in Latin America towards more independence, towards dealing with the horrendous internal problems of massive poverty and suffering and inequality and so on. There are timid steps towards that, and that's a positive trajectory. There's another trajectory which is leading toward destruction. Climate change is one case, nuclear war is another, and there are others. And the question is, well, which one's going to dominate? No point speculating about that.
Profesor Chomsky, muchas gracias por tomar el tiempo de hablar con nosotros hoy y muchas gracias a nuestros televidentes por estar con nosotros en esta entrevista con Noam Chomsky, considerado por algunos de ser el intelectual viviente más importante del mundo.